when Vikas approached me, I was given the impression that this will be a very diversified participants from across India as well as from diversified disciplines. So I thought that whatever is my specialization, based on my specialization, this topic would be suitable for many of you. I can't say all, but it will be suitable for many of you. Now, before I start, I would like to request of you that if you have any questions, if you have any doubts or even some comments, because that will make the session more vibrant. Okay. And with that words, I would like to just share my slides. Can you see my slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it visible? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Thank
Visible.
you. I'll just switch off my video because I'm using the mobile unnecessarily. It is distorting my. So this is the topic which I chose to speak on today. So this is the field survey in social science, and as you all know that when you are conducting your research, you need to gather some information. Whether you need to gather information from the secondary sources or from the primary sources. That means if you gather information from the primary sources, especially if you gathered information field itself by the researcher, in that case this is basically the field survey, which whereas the researcher can use the data or the information from the means which is already collected by a group of researcher or organization, and it is left in the public domain where from the researcher can use the data for his or her own research. Okay, so we are now confining ourselves to the field survey, and for the field survey, most importantly, you have to keep in mind that these are the cornerstones of the survey research. So what are the cornerstones? When we talk about the survey, many of you, I don't know at what stage of the research in, but many of you, I believe that are doing PhDs in different Indian universities and in different subjects. So, and many of you are also using, that means your studies are based on the primary research or primary survey. Now, when you think of a survey, you have some idea, and it is, when you have this idea of going to the field and collecting data for some research, it sound deceptively simple. But when we will discuss it, the structure, the methodology, the rigor, then so many important things are there which are to be addressed before you take before you conduct a survey, and also during the survey, what are the problems which you may encounter and how to resolve these problems. So these are basically what I will be going to discuss in today's lecture, but I'm not sure whether within 1 hour I'll be able to cover everything, but whatever is possible within this timeline, I will try to discuss. So survey, so it raises some of the questions. That means when you are trying to plan for a survey, the most important thing is the sample size. That would be the ideal sample required in order to conduct the research, so that you can conclude or you can draw certain inferences about the population. You must be knowing the difference between the population and the sample. Population is the total subjects which you are going to study. whereas the sample is the small subset of the population. So obviously, when you are your study is based on the sample, because when you go to the field, there are two types of research. One is the census based research. That means the entire of your study. That means if you have, say, for example, 1,000 households in a village, and that village is your focus of the study. In that case, you have to take all the 1,000 households into account and collect the respective information from all 1,000 households. This is called a census method. Now, obviously, census method means that you are studying the entire population. It has its merits in the sense that you are not missing out any individual. So you have a very rigorous information on the data. But at the same time, survey through the census method is extremely expensive, because you have to cover all are the focus of your study. So in that case, it requires a lot of manpower, and it is very, very expensive. And therefore, most of the cases you will find that the studies are not based on the census method, sample survey. Okay, so the sample surveys, when you go through the sample survey, in that case, obviously you have to deal with the sample size, because suppose hypothetically, take the example that the household is having the village is having 1,000 village households. So which means if you take on average 5 people, that means that 5,000 people in the same village. Now, these 5,000 people, if you go by the sample survey, it is not possible to conduct interview with all the 5,000 people. So what you do, you draw a small subset of this population, which is called sample, and you study the sample rather, and then you conclude about the population of the village. Okay, so when you are taking the sample based survey, obviously the most important thing is that how many people you need to survey in order to get the precise information. That means you are accurately able to predict about your population. Okay, so that is something which is related to the sample size. Now, the next important thing is that you have somehow concluded that this will be your ideal sample size. So obviously, you have a, suppose I say that you have a population of 500, and you selected a sample of 500. So there is a risk in the sense that these 500 samples should be representative of the population. If they are not representative, entire exercise of information and then analyzing it will be a futile exercise. Because at the end of the day, whatever you conclude from the data analysis based on the sample survey will be inaccurate. Okay, you won't be able to make the external validation. That means whatever you conclude about the population will not be correct. Okay, so the sample size is important. If you increase the sample size, obviously, what does it mean? It means that you are more and more able to incorporate the heterogeneity of the population. Okay? So larger sample size is important because the sample will bear most of the heterogeneity of the population, and it will be more representative of the population. But there is a trade-off in the sense that if you increase the sample size, you will be able to meet more and more accuracy. But how big sample size is required? Because if you keep on increasing, definitely benefit of that. That means your accuracy will be improved. But I can, since it is not a proper, I'm not doing the quantitative kind of data analysis. You have to just believe me from my my statements, that if there is a limit beyond which, if you increase the sample size, accuracy will not increase. Accuracy will increase sample size, but at a okay. So that at a diminishing rate means certain level of sample size. After that, if you keep on increasing sample size, your accuracy will increase, but too much. But the kind of trade-off, in a sense, that increasing the sample size for a it increases the timeline of the survey, which means along with the time cost, there is an economic cost as well, because you have to survive in the field, you have to pay the enumerators, you have to cost. So, which means that it involves a balance, which will lead to select a sample size which will not compromise accuracy, but be too big, which is closer enough to the population size. Okay, sample size is one important thing which is to be decided by the researcher. That means accurately you calculate the sample size, which will be ideal for your research. The second, suppose you have decided that your sample size should be 500. Okay, so 500 people you will be interacting, or for quantitative purpose, whatever is method of doing the survey or interactions. But the question that who will be these 500 people out of 5,000 population sites? So you are drawing only a small subset of the population, and that small subset of the population, that means your sample, members of the population who will be part of your, or the members of your sample. That means this involves the importance of the sampling design. That means how you decide your sampling will decide that your sample is a representative of the population. That means it bears all the heterogeneity associated with the population. So there are various designing the sampling, like right from the simple probability sampling, non-probability sampling. Are you aware of these terms, probability sampling or random sampling, non-probability sampling? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
You are not aware. So the is a sampling where you basically collect the each of the members of the population has a known zero and equal probability of occurrence. What does it mean? You have, that means in order to collect the probability, the first most important thing is the sampling frame. What sampling frame is basically the listing of the individuals who are part of, who will be, who are basically the members of the population. That means if you have 5,000 household members in the village, that means 5,000 total individuals residing in a particular village, the entire individuals should be with you. This is called the sampling frame. Now, once you have the sampling frame, then from this sampling frame, you decide randomly. There are various methods. You decide randomly 500 samples. Okay, so without the do a random sampling. Why? Because as I said, that the probability of the of a selection of is basically equal to what? Suppose your population size is capital. So the probability of occurrence of any member of the population in a sample is basically small n divided by capital N. Okay. You don't know the sampling frame. Then what will happen? You don't know capital N. You may be given the impression that these 5,000 individuals residing in the village. The Gram Panchayat has given you the impression, but it can be correct, it cannot, it may not be correct. Okay. So if it is not that is given, that is your sampling frame. But if it is not, then in that case, your capital N in the denominator, you don't know. How about the probability? You cannot calculate the probability. Okay. So the probability sampling or the random sample says that each of the members of the population must have equal non-zero of occurrence in the sample, whereas the non-probability sampling means that you don't have the sampling frame. So you don't have the sampling frame, that entire listing of the individuals in the villages or in the blocks, sub-blocks, or in some urban or in the districts, whatever is your focus. In that case, what is the problem? Not calculate the probability. So in that case, what is the outcome? That means that some of the members may occurrence in the may not have any chance of occurrence sample. Okay, so this is called the non-probability sampling. In the absence of the sampling frame, the researcher may have to conduct the study through the non-probability sampling. Okay, non like convenience sampling, sampling. So there are various of doing non-probability sampling, but if you are quantitative research, in that case, the entire hypothesis testing is to be done just by using sampling. So that is basically the drop sampling. In that case, you can do the entire inference statistical analysis through these probability sampling you have collected through the field survey. Okay, suppose your problem is solved. That means you have decided an ideal sample size, you have decided an ideal sampling design, which basically has ensured you to select the sample are representative of the population. By representative of the population, I mean that the sample bears all the heterogeneous traits of the population, so that whatever conclusion through the sample observations will going to be population as well. Okay, so if your sample is not a representative sample, whatever conclusion you derive from the sample observation is not going to match with the population. You cannot infer the sample observations. Okay, so your accurate or the precise estimates of your population parameters. In the statistics and parameters, do you know the difference? Hello?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so the parameters are basically some of the characteristics.
Madam, you are presenting first. I think your slide is not moving, ma'am.
No, I haven't moved the slides. I'm just talking something to
okay,
this.
ma'am.
I'm
Here. Yes, okay, ma'am.
move the slides. Okay, so what I'm saying that the sampling representing some of the characteristics of the population. That means if you want to do a quantitative data analysis, in that case, the parameters are basically mean, sample standard, sample median, sample covariance, standard deviations or variance. So all these are your are the characteristics which represents your population. In order to understand the population, you need to derive these characteristics. Now, these are the parameters which is not known to you. Why? Because you don't know the entire population. Suppose you want to just study a certain district, and district you may be knowing that in India some of the districts are really in the number of the villages, number of the urban pockets, it may be very, very large numbers. So in that case, it is not possible for a researcher to do the census-based survey of the entire district. So what the survey, the researcher can just collect some samples. That means study the sample in order to conclude some phenomena or some events in the population. Now, the sample survey, from the sample, when the researcher collects the data from the from the field, the sample
Ma'am,
yes, please.
ma'am, sorry to interrupt you. Ma'am, can you please give one and this parameters?
I'm just talking about, I just said about the parameters. Now I'm talking about the sample statistics. That is the same way. Sample statistics are the characteristics which describe a sample. So the parameters are the characteristics so sorry, a population. So the population, suppose you take certain variables of the population, and in order to understand that variables, you take the sample mean, you take the sample variance, you take the sample standard deviation. So in order to understand that variable, the same way, for that same variable, through the sample study, when you derive, okay, that means sample mean, sample standard deviation, sample variance, etc., you are basically calculating the sample statistics. So is it clear the difference between the statistics and parameter? So the sample statistics basically tries to understand, you try to understand the sample variables, and the population parameters, you try to understand the population parameters. Now, obviously, the sample is drawn from the population, and the sample population parameters are basically not known to you. Okay, if it is not known to you, then in that case there is no need for you to just go to the field and collect information. Okay, so since the sample population parameters are not known to you, what you do, you go to the field, you do an appropriate sampling design and take the representative sample, collect the data, and then try to create certain characteristics of the sample variables. These are your statistics, and the statistics are taken as an estimates of your population parameters. Okay, so you can understand you are doing a very risky business. Why? Because you are collecting the data, which is a sample survey from the field, and by studying the sample, you are estimating out the population parameters. So given that the population is huge and sample is only a small subset of the population, selection of the sample and statistics of the sample studies are both very important. Why? Because not only will you ensure adequate sample size, if your sample study is designed appropriately, you can ensure the representativeness of the sample. Okay, the representativeness of the sample just depends on these two things. One is the sample size, another is the sampling design. That means how you design the sample so as to select those members of the population which are equal sample representative of the population. Okay, apart from these two things, the appropriateness of your survey depends upon what questions you ask to the respondents and how the respondents are responding to your questions, whether they are able to understand what you are asking them, and you are able to report or record those responses appropriately. So the questionnaire, designing of the questionnaire, and then the art of posing questions, the sequence of posing questions are also the art of seminar, okay? Because this actually creates a lot of, if you don't know properly or appropriately, then it may create a lot of distortions, and whatever you record may not be appropriate, okay? So then we will discuss about this questionnaire and how it may distort your survey findings a little shortly, but these are basically the most important part of doing a survey, okay? So in addition to that, you are maybe also requested to take a call on what would be the appropriate method of collecting the data. That means you have different types of methods. You are most of you may be aware that when you are going to the field, you can collect the data through the sampling method by using a face-to-face interview. That means in a face-to-face interview, you are asking some questions, and then the respondent is responding to that questions. The method of posing questions can be through the structured questionnaire, or through the open-ended questionnaire, or just through the interactions. You are just allowing entirely open-ended. You are allowing the respondents to speak about himself or herself, and you are actually moderating the discussions through some keywords, throwing some keywords or key terms, and allowing the direction of the conversation to flow very naturally, and you're recording those important points which are critical for your research, okay? So this is one way which is basically the qualitative researcher in a face-to-face interviews they do, and then you are recording the conversations, and so that you can go back and listen to it many times to get some important aspects from that entire conversations, the hints, the pause, all these things are important in the qualitative research, okay? And another one is the open-ended questionnaire, where you are allowing the respondent to exercise their freedom to direct the pattern of conversations, not giving very much liberty to talk, okay? So in a structured questionnaire, whereas you know that there are very limited options. Many of the questions are in terms of yes or no, or in terms of the some options are given, do you agree, something like that, and the respondents are asked to just say that yes, no, agree, or perception, okay? So the structured all are having some merits and demerits. I'm not going to go to all those details, but there are, apart from these direct going to the field, there are other methods of collecting data through the sample survey. But one is that open-ended interviews. So the where the mobile networks for India, even in the rural areas, are very, very deep rooted and penetrating. So in that case, the surveys, many of the surveys of this mobile network, and they are collecting information through the telephonic survey, okay? So there's some pre-recorded questions are already set, and once depending upon the convenient timing of the researcher, these pre-recorded questions are played, and then the responses are recorded, okay? There can be the question, the data can be collected through the network, and it can be collected through other means as well. Like people can use, apart from the pen and pencil, people in the direct face-to-face interviews also nowadays computers and softwares are used in order to just avoid the time consuming the time consuming in data input and recordings, and the errors, the possible errors or mismatches are actually avoided. minimized through the computer assisted recording of the surveys. Okay. Now the question is that it is the researcher's discretion that which method of collecting data from the field will be appropriate for him or her. Okay, so if the researcher aims to collect a lot of information, that means sample size is very large. In that case, many times a researcher resort to the Google Forms, that means computer assisted, email assisted, or telephonic kind of survey, rather than going to the paper and involving the enumerators to take to interact with the respondents and collect data. So that appropriateness also is something which is discretionary, and it is the researcher who knows what should be appropriate for his or her studies. Okay, but the most important thing is that the methodology for the appropriateness should be taken into the main focus in deciding whether the survey will be appropriate. Okay, so therefore deciding to the survey means a close commitment of oneself to work through a myriad of issues, each of which is critical to to this ultimate success of the survey, and the appropriateness which you derive when you analyze the data and conclude from that survey data. Okay, what you conclude, you don't conclude about the sample, you conclude about the population, mind it. And given that it is a survey based, concluding about the population is something very risky, and that's why lot of precautions are to be undertaken. Okay, so now the survey face various challenges. So how to produce precise estimates by surveying only a relatively small proportion of the large area is really something which is challenging. Okay, now these are the four cornerstones. If you can see the figures, the coverage, sampling, and response and measurement, these are the four cornerstones of the survey research. How they are the four cornerstones? What is coverage? Coverage actually means that what proportion of the population you are selecting as your sample. Okay, so that will basically ensure the external validation. The most important thing is that your sample should bear all the heterogeneity, as I already said, of the population, so that whatever you conclude from the sample will actually actually be close to the population parameters. Okay, so the estimations which you do through the sample based study will be closer to the population parameters. Okay, so the first part is the coverage. Coverage basically says what is the sample size. That is the first part. What is the second part? Second part is a sampling. That means how you derive or how you draw the sample from the population. Okay, so there are, as I said, there are various methods of drawing sample, not only probability sample and non-probability sample, which I already discussed, but within the probability sample there are various methods. Okay, so many of you know, but maybe not all of you know, that now, apart from the simple sampling, there are systematic random sampling, there are stratified random sampling, then clustered sampling. So these are all probability sampling. All are randomly selected from the population, and they are. If you draw samples from through these methods, you can also do the inferential statistics for the quantitative data analysis. Okay, they are not non-probability. They are not non-probability. They are all probability sampling, but various different methods. Okay, let me tell you what are these different methods, like the stratified random sampling. What happens to the random sampling? Random sampling means that you are randomly picking up some members of the population as your sample. Okay, after deciding the coverage, that means after deciding your sample size. So when you are randomly selecting, it can be through the systematic random sampling, just you have a sampling frame, that means the entire list of the population. That's how it is selecting members to every 50th member will be part of my sample, or every 15th member will be part of my sample. Okay, so you just randomly, but it is in a systematic manner. That is one doing, but in many cases it happens selected the sample randomly, but compositions are not so representative in a sense. Suppose I'm telling you that in a you are trying to study the emotional quotients or the EQI, IQI both of the PhD students, or you are trying to understand the mental health problems, because you know the when you are doing PhD, obviously it's a very uncertain time, uncertain in terms of your PhD outcomes, because it's research is very no, never research is something which is so what will be your findings, and how you will be able to impress your your employers in the job market, which will help you to get a good decent job. So all these things are at the PhD stage. So obviously in that stage the student suffers from various mental anxiety, stress, depressions. So you are interested in measuring their mental health. Okay, so now in that case you are doing a systematic random sampling. You have a entire that university, the university handed over the entire list of the PhD students in different disciplines: social science, science, natural science, environmental science, computer science, like that, the humanities, literature, etc., management. So now when you are drawing, so you have a pool of all the students who are part of your population, and from that you are randomly selecting the samples. It may happen that even after random selections, your sample members are having certain certain the distribution of the members are to some extent skewed in terms of, say, gender. Like you have a more male members as compared to female, or you have more female members as compared to male, or it may happen that the all the different schools in the sense that natural science, life science, computer science, social science, humanities, management, they are not adequately represented in your sample. So what will happen? Whatever you conclude, if your sample does not, that means your sample fails to incorporate most of the heterogeneities of your population. Okay, so that means the when you are talking about the mental anxiety, stress, etc., obviously the stress level of a science student, or the stress level of the humanities or social students are not supposed to be same. If it is same, that also should be studied, but it is, you can conjecture that they are of different kinds depending upon their different how serious is their discipline in terms of the methodology in order to conclude something from their research, right? That is one thing. Another thing is that the job market, the post PhD scenario, that are main causes of stress. Okay, because after that you get the degree, will ensure you that you will be given a decent placement, right? So that just with a PhD idea. So in that case, you have to face the labor market, and therefore a lot of uncertainties are associated with that. Okay. So therefore, and apart from that, there are multiple reasons for anxiety, stress, and other things. I'm not talking in details because my time is very much limited. So given these uncertainties, if you want to understand the kind of if you try to incorporate all the heterogeneity, you need to have a representativeness of the students in your sample. So obviously caste, etc., but also in terms of their disciplines, broad disciplines in terms of their social science, life science, physical science, like that. So if you don't do, whatever you conclude will not be a representative of the population. You are subject to certain biasness. Okay, so you understand that these coverage and the sampling are very important in order to ensure the representativeness of the sample, of the representativeness of the population in the sample. Now, what I am talking about, the stratified random sampling. What the stratified random sampling does, so it is better from the random sampling or systematic random sampling, because in the stratified random sampling, we basically divide the entire population into different strata. Strata can be anything, but it is basically something which is heterogeneous across each other, but homogeneous inside. Like you can say the students who are belonging to the physical science, students who are belonging to the linguistic or language, or students who are belonging to the social science, they are different in some respect, but internally they are much more homogeneous. Okay, so the at the same time, your sample now becomes more and more representative of the population. There can be a cluster sampling as well, where the cluster sampling is different from the stratified sampling. How they are different? Cluster sampling basically clusters and a strata. If you take these two terms, clusters are basically homogeneous from outside, exogenously, but heterogeneous from inside, like the example of a slum. So if you take the slums of different slums of say of India, so what are the slums? If you take in whenever you talk, you the slum, that you uttered the term slums, what do you visualize about slums? That the slums are basically the place where poor people dwell. Many of them are the migrant populations in the urban pockets. You don't find slums in the rural regions. Slums are basically are the phenomena of the urban settlement, and these peoples are mostly the migrants who came in the urban areas and from the underprivileged background. So they are poor, they are living in a very unhygienic, with a poor sanitation, poor hygiene, and many other things, with poor public provisionings. Okay, so these are basically very common things among, and very congested kind of living accommodations. So these are the things which you can find very common across the slums of any areas. Okay, now, but inside the slum there may be heterogeneity, but slums, when you talk, it is homogeneous across different settlements. Okay, so the these in, if you are trying to do some study which are based on slums, apart from doing these as a in a random sampling method, it is better to do it through the cluster sampling. Cluster sampling here basically involves randomization in two stages. How this randomization takes place? You take the list of the slums in a certain city. Say for Delhi, you have 13 or 14 registered slums. Okay. Now, out of these 14 slums, as they are homogeneous from outside, so in that case, if you go to the slum and interview the people who are residing in the slums, you may find lot of similarities. So it's better not to just go for the simple random sampling. Rather, what you can do, in order to incorporate more heterogeneity, you basically randomize at the slum level. So out of 13, suppose you take 4 slums randomly from these 13 slums. And now from the 4 slums, you do separate again in the second stage randomization. Suppose each of the slums are having, say, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000 households. I'm just giving you hypothetical figure. So out of this 1,000 households, you are not supposed to do a census kind of survey, but you are doing a sampling. So what you can do, you can randomize out of 1,000, say 30 slums from each, or 40 slums from each of these settlements. Okay, 40 households from each of these slums. Okay, so you will then have 120 household, which is your sample size, which you are going to study in an in-depth kind of an interviews. Is it clear the difference between the simple random sampling, stratified random sampling, and cluster random sampling? Is it clear? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the next is basically, so we discussed about the coverage and the sampling. The next is basically the response. That means how the researcher or the enumerators are posing question in order to extract or elicit information from the respondents. Okay, so many of the questions are too crude to ask, right? Like, how do you consider yourself poor? Why do you treat yourself rich? Do you treat yourself poor? Do you treat yourself from the middle class? If you ask these kind of questions, you are not supposed to get a very appropriate response. Okay, so, and there will be a lot of subjectivity. Okay, so subjectivities, you cannot address these subjectivities because different individuals will interpret your question differently and will respond according to their cognitive limitations. Okay, so therefore the responses are to be standardized. In order to standardize the survey question, the long, very large scale survey questions have a very, very well tested the kind of questionnaires which are to be seen even by the individual researcher before they go to the field or they formulate their own survey questions. How they pose the questions, please do remember, like if you take a long surveys, okay, which involves a lot of households, okay, like if you take the national sample survey, or if you take the national family health survey, NFHS, or IHTS, so they are all these very secondary data, but they are based on the surveys, sample surveys, where the sampling is a very important part, and then the questionnaires are pre-tested several times, so they are very much well proved. So what kind of questions they ask, how they pose the questions, and in what sequence they ask the questions are something which are critically important in order to derive the appropriateness from the survey, from the respondents to. So the response is important. Now the response can be distorted from the two sides. That means one is the problem of the enumerator, another is the problem associated with the responders. Okay, now the enumerators may be very much biased for certain cause, okay, and therefore enumerator is posing the questions in such a manner which basically influences the responders, and therefore the responders are, instead of responding his or her own perception or own idea, he or she is basically confiding to the ideas subscribed by the enumerator himself or herself. Okay, so if these things happens, then your entire exercise will be a futile exercise. You are committing various forms of errors. Okay, so please do understand that it can be from both sides. That means enumerators are not properly trained. So that means the researcher himself is apart from he or she involving in the survey, he or she is basically engages some enumerators, paid enumerators, okay, and they are basically given the questionnaire, ask them to read and ask them that whether you understand all the questions properly, and then they are asked to go to the field. These kinds of casual approach may be dangerous in a sense that the researchers, the way they understand, they conceive the problem, they understand the problem, and therefore they know that what are each of these questions actually meant for the research. But when you are entrusting some enumerators, they may not be well educated, and even if they are educated, they may not be having that actually they may not have the exposure to research, or even if they have the exposure to research, that particular area of research they may not have that exposure, okay, and therefore they don't understand the gravity of many of the questions, which the appropriateness actually decides the fate of your research, okay, and therefore they ask many of the questions in very casual manner, and entire and sometimes they, even without understanding the question, they ask the question, they translate it into the local language and ask question in such a way that it may not be able to the responders may not be able to understand it properly. So what will happen? The responders will respond in a manner the way he or she understood the questions, and obviously in that case it may be completely incorrect. Whatever responses which will be recorded by the enumerator is not correct, and this kinds of thing, it systematically happens with many. In that case the entire data gets contaminated, okay, so you can understand that the response is another important cornerstones, both from the problems associated with the enumerators and the responders. Sometimes the responders are in hurry, because many of the time when the researcher tries to collect information from the say individuals who are from the lower socioeconomic background, they are basically poor people, and they are most of the time in the labor market. So if the researcher is taking too much time in asking questions, they may lose their the commitments in their job place, okay, so they may be in a hurry, and in order to get rid or escape from the responders, they may basically satisfy whatever responses which will satisfy the responder, so that the responder won't ask the second question, the more detailed questions from that, okay, and there sometimes they also when they find that it is very much lengthy, they basically wants to stop, they would like to quit. So quitting in the middle may be another important problems of the response. Why? Because if you find that too much attrition, that means non-responses, that means the enumerators are not able to complete the questionnaires, the responders have abandoned from the beginning, or they have abandoned in the middle. So these non-responses can be also another source of biasness, okay, so that the non-response bias can be very serious problem in the survey based research. Why? Because if you see the responders and the non-responders, that means those who have responded to the enumerators questions properly and completed the survey, and those who have not, if their distributions are more or less similar, then it is not a bias, you can just relax. But if their distributions are different, they follow certain patterns which is specific to as compared to the responders who have responded or completed the survey, in that case it is a severe response bias, okay, so which may contaminate your estimation exercise, okay. Okay, the next is basically the measurement. Measurements here, again, there can be some problems associated or biasness associated with that in respect to recording the responses. Okay, so whatever the responders are saying, the one is challenge is the posing the question, and then let the responders reveal their true information. That is one challenge. Another challenge is that when you are recording the responses, okay, so you may record, you may listen to him, but while recording there may be a lot of errors. Okay, so that can also, if the survey is full of these kinds of errors, or in proportion to it, that means that these kinds of errors are in large proportion, obviously that will contaminate the survey findings. Okay, so these are basically the measurement errors. Similarly, when you are entering the data, one is that entering the recording the data from the field, another is the entering the data for analysis. So in between also there can be lot of lapses, and that may create some measurement error. So you can think of this coverage, sampling, response, and the measurement. These are the four cornerstones of the survey research. So tell me, what is my timeline? I know that I'm very badly, I can't just be very articulate in terms of time management.
No, no problem. No, no issues.
So how much time you will be able to give me?
Yes, ma'am. You can take ma'am more time. No problem, ma'am.
Okay,
We are
so
in.
let me just take another 15 or 20 minutes, 15 minutes,
Sure,
and then
sure, sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
I will then ask, leave you to just, I will take some questions from you, so that, without interactions, I don't consider the lecture is a successful lecture or not.
Sure,
Okay,
sure, ma'am.
so, okay. So the questions now, so you understood these four cornerstones, and now the question is that when you are posing the questions, that means your research question. One is that you have your research objectives and research question. Another is that from the research questions you have to construct the questionnaire, the survey schedule. Okay, now these questionnaires are not just fall from the sky. Okay, so the questionnaires are constructed from the research objectives and the research question itself. Okay, so therefore I'm just giving you one example. Suppose you are interested to understand the well-being of the individuals in the village who are having certain rehabilitations. They are basically resettled and rehabilitated, and therefore they are basically in a new environment, and you are asking them about their well-beings. So if it is your well-being is just one aspect of your research, you can just ask one question. You can keep only one question, where you can just ask how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with your life in general. Okay, in a new settlement. So here you are giving 5 options, which are very dissatisfied, neither dissatisfied nor satisfied, then satisfied, very satisfied, and leave the responders to respond to any of these options. Okay, now if your survey questions or if your research question or research objectives are largely dwelling on the well-being, okay, so in that case it is the well-being term you may be knowing that it is multidimensional, right? Well-being cannot be, one is that it talks about the quality of life, but as you know that the quality of life can be decided by many factors. Apart from the economic factors, environmental factors are there, social factors are there, then your health factors are there, political factors are there. So the well-being can be measured from various perspectives. So if you have the well-being as your only objectives, that means the most important, all pervading objectives, in that case your questionnaire should have many questions on well-being. Okay, and you are asking the responders how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with your life in general, which you have also asked in the earlier set. But here you are also repeating the same questions of his or a perception about satisfaction or dissatisfaction, of the which he or she felt at his new home where he lived. Okay. Similarly, you can ask about the health, of how satisfied or dissatisfied is the perception of the individual about his own health, about his social networks or social contacts, about his political environment, about the natural or the physical environment where he or she is living. So there can be a lot of questions about his satisfaction or dissatisfaction from the life, which are related to the various dimensions of well-being. Okay, so the depending upon your research objectives and research questions, your survey questions are to be constructed. Is it clear to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Now I just tell you very quickly about the modeling part. Modeling part in the sense that the first part of your research does not start from the field. Field you go much later. Okay. First, what you do, you conceptualize. Your research has to be formalized. For the formalization of the research, most important thing is the first is that your understanding of the literature, right? So you have a proper understanding of the contemporary research. So based on the your understanding, you try to basically understand what are the literature gap, and from the literature gap you basically draw your own research objectives as well as research question. Now, in the very beginning, when you are formalizing your research in the first stage, it is at the conceptual stage, right? Conceptual stage is the much more abstract stage or more hypothetical stage. Okay, so this in that conceptual stage, you are trying to conceive some ideas which has to be translated into more of the what's the practical platforms through the measurement. So that stage is basically called the operationalization stage. Okay, so first is the conceptualization, followed by the operationalization. Okay, so that means you are reading the literature, you are reading the theories, and from the theories you are trying to conceptualize or conceive some idea. That means though the theoretical understanding help you to just ask some questions which are very raw in nature, which are not so sophisticated, which are very much in the conceptual state. Okay, so this is basically called the first stage, conceptualization. Suppose you are trying to understand, or your hypothesis is that the urban poors are more migrant in nature. Okay, urban poors are more migrant in nature. This is your hypothesis. Now the question is that if you two things are in the conceptual stage. What are the two things? One is the migrant, another is the poor. Because poor or poverty, it's a very, very abstract term. How you define poverty? If you have to measure the poverty, you have to take some operationalization the practical definition of poverty in order to operationalize it. Because if you take the poverty, what is poverty? If somebody asks you, it's a very abstract term, right? So whether you will going to measure poverty, because your hypothetical or your theoretical understanding of poverty has to be now translated into something which is measurable, so that you can go to the field and collect information and analyze it and say that this much is the poverty and these are the people who are really no, very poor, moderately poor, or less poor. So all these things, if you have to conclude, you cannot just dwell on the term poverty. Poverty is a very formal and crude term. It is multidimensional. So whether you will be measuring poverty through head count, whether you will be measuring poverty through income, through expenditure, consumption expenditure, or through the calories. So there are very large literature on the debates associated to each of the different categories of measurement of poverty. Whatever be the debates, as a researcher, you have the discretion to choose any of these in order to measure it. Okay, so when you are breaking the term poverty into certain simplified definition to operationalize it, so you are basically narrowing down the definition of poverty. Okay, so the conceptual stage is the first stage. The conceptual stage has to be basically understood from its various dimensions. Like poverty has its various dimensions. Now World Bank talk about the water poverty, time poverty. So apart, earlier we have only the concept of economic poverty. Now we have the, apart from the economic poverty, we have other poverties as well, because when we take the Amartya Sen's definition of poverty, we basically talk about the entitlement and capability. So you enlarge the theoretical construct of poverty. But when you have to measure it, operationalize it, you have to break it into different dimensions. Okay. Now, when you have broken it into different dimensions, you actually can derive or take the variables, appropriate variables, which are important to for you to measure. So the variables again can be narrowed down to indicators. I can give you these examples. So suppose you are interested to understand social status. Okay. Now, obviously, social status is an abstract term. It's more of a theoretical construct. Okay. So social status, if you ask a villager, what is your social status? Do you think that he or she will understand what you intend to ask him? I don't think that him or her, I don't think that he or she will not understand your motivation for that questions. Okay, so social status therefore needs to be break up into the variables, because social status is multidimensional. So what are the variables? Social status can be represented through the years of schooling. That means education, income, occupation. So that when you take education, when you take income, when you take occupation, these are something which is much more tangible, right? Social status is more abstract. These variables are much more tangible in the perspective of measurement. Now again, education, you take the variable education. Education is again very vague. If you ask a villager, what is your education? It's not very easy to respond. Okay, so unless and until you give an operational definition of these variables. That means what is the last school, that means what standard you have achieved in your school. That means highest level of the school which you have completed, or how many years you have acquired your school education. Okay, so these are various questions which will help the respondents to respond to your queries more appropriately, rather than if you go by the terms education, income. So if you ask what is your income, again there is a scope for the misinterpretation. Why? Because the income can be that the individual may have different multiple sources of income. One is from the stable sources, and others are from the unstable sources, which are very much fluctuating and seasonal in nature. If you are not explicitly asking about all, you may miss out some of the information. Okay, so you have to ask in a more operationalized manner about the income of the household. Like some of the children who are also going to the schools are also earned in the seasonal, in some of the months when there is a harvesting season. The children's, instead of the parents, instead of sending the children to the school, they send the children to the nearby fields for doing some very petty jobs and to earn some income. Okay, so these are very unstable or seasonal income. But if you don't ask explicitly about the income of from these source, that source, etc., you will miss out the family income of the household, which is the sum total of all the incomes, which are not all generated from a very regular form of incomes. Okay, various irregular incomes are also part of the income of the household. Okay, similarly, when you ask about what is your occupation, you have to be much more explicit in order to break it into an operational definition. That means whether the household is doing a skilled jobs, unskilled jobs, or you may classify it as a blue collar, white collar, gig workers, professionals, etc., etc. Okay, now when you are asking about these different operational definition, you are asking the question, what is the highest levels of schools you have completed? Similarly, the income can have, instead of one question, you can have some questions, set of questions, where you are asking various regular sources, irregular sources, income coming from the children's, income coming from the women who in and the income from the say somebody who is a farmer, who is incoming, whose main primary income is from the agriculture, but he is also doing some odd jobs during the lean season and earn as a migrant. Okay, so in that case, if you leave out, that means in the lean season it is the woman who manages the agriculture, and the male members move out from the village and earn some odd jobs through the labor market in the urban pockets, and then in the constructions, or in some daily payment of the wage, as a wage worker in some factories. And therefore, if you don't be explicit, you will miss out some very important informations. Okay, so how you so that means from the concept to the models, and from the models to the research questions, all are very critical phases. Okay, so you need to sit with the research objectives and then translate it into the variables, and then from the variables to the operational definitions, and then finally to the indicators. Okay, so the abstract concepts in the hypothesis, then you have to come to the concrete definition of the concept, and then to the measurable definitions of the concept. Okay, so therefore definition bridges the abstract art of thinking and make it much more concrete art of doing for measurement purposes. Okay, so I think that I'll leave here, because I have a lot of slides and it won't be possible, but rather I would like to just take some questions and respond to those questions. That will also extend my lecture to some specifics which you are interested, or you are in or you are likely to know from me. Is it fine?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any questions, specific questions?
Yes, yes, madam. So thank you so much, madam. And just now session is open. So I request to participants, if you anyone have any questions and queries, so you can ask to madam, and you can ask both Hindi and English, any medium you can ask.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Any participants?
Actually, online lectures have lot of since I don't see the faces, I try to elaborate further many of the things, knowing that the participants are from the heterogeneous background, and some of them may not be knowing some of the things which I find very trivial. So I keep on elaborating, and therefore I can't able to manage my time. That's my problem, and I meet this problem everywhere.
Preeti ma'am?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Hello,
yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, yes. I hear
Okay.
you.
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am,
Please,
first of all, it was a very interesting
please
session.
introduce yourself and
I was
answer
listening.
to the question.
Hi, it will be very nice of you if
Yeah,
you can introduce yourself
yes.
Okay,
before
ma'am.
you ask me
Okay,
question.
so yeah. So myself, Nang Reshmi Thamong. Ma'am, I'm a PhD scholar at Dibrugarh University.
Very good.
So, yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, I'm doing a research. I'm from like commerce background. So,
Yes.
I'm doing a research in financial literacy and personal financial planning among the college teachers in
Okay.
Arunachal Pradesh. So, like, I'm using this census studies, census method because my population size is very small.
Very small.
So,
Okay.
yes, ma'am, it's around 200, 250. So,
Okay.
now the problem is that, ma'am, as you mentioned in your like presentation that uh, like while doing survey we face lots of difficulties. Now one
Hmm.
of the problem that I'm facing
Non-responsive.
right now, yes ma'am,
Non-responsive.
non-responses, missing
Right.
data,
Huh.
something like that. So ma'am, since I'm not using this like probability sampling, I'm doing this like total
Snowballing.
enumeration. Yeah,
Huh.
so in that case ma'am, what is the solution to this, ma'am? Should I like totally eliminate the data, or is there any other like
No,
solution to
actually,
it?
this is really very difficult, very tricky question in a sense that non-responses. If it is, what is the percentage of non-responses? Suppose you have 200 house responders. Out of 200, you have 7 non-responses. But if it is more than 20%, then you have to be little more alert. Because non-responses may have, that means the people who have completed the survey and the people who have not completed the survey, if they are of different, completely different types, that means the non-responders, by choosing not to respond or by their attrition, they are actually making your sample very narrow. So you fail to incorporate the typical characteristics of the attrition or the non-responders. So you basically have to see that whether those who are non-responders, are they same in terms of their some broad characteristics, like in terms of their gender, in terms of their years of, because you are dealing with the college teacher, so all will be at least master's degree. So variation, so you won't get the variation there, but you have to find out some of the characteristics where you may find variation, like whether it is the science teacher who are with a high attrition, or whether it is the humanities teachers who are with the high attrition. So these kinds of things will be, at least my suggestion is that even if you can't encounter these problems, but you should, as a researcher, you should tell all these things in your limitation. Okay, so these
Okay.
are the research is, no research is flawless. Research,
Yes ma'am.
we as a researcher, we try to be sincere, and we try to just get as much appropriateness as possible. That is our objectives. But there may be some shortcomings, and no harm to list all these shortcomings and saying that these are the problems could not be addressed because of these things. Once you write these things, as a researcher, it is much more, your research gets much more rigor, because you are aware of the problems, but you could not handle it because of certain issues which is beyond the control of the researcher.
Okay.
Is it
So,
clear
ma'am,
what I said?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So that means I have to highlight all those challenges in my limitations.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you
Okay,
can
okay.
say that these can be little related to your underestimation or overestimation. So if you know the broad characteristics of the non-responders, it is always good to just give the descriptive statistics of them and say that these are the people who are not participated in the survey, and maybe that lead to certain underestimation of my results or overestimation, whatever you suspect.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes,
Let
welcome.
Preeti sang one time.
Yeah.
Uh, Preeti madam. Yes,
Am I audible?
yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Good evening, ma'am. I am Preeti, research
Good
scholar
evening.
from the Department of Psychology, Central University of Haryana.
Okay.
Ma'am, I have a query regarding that you have elaborated the term population and sample, but I have also go through a term universe.
Universe
Can
is
you differentiate
basically
between?
the same as the population. That means the universe talks about the totality of the subjects which you want to study. Okay, so that is the population, that is the universe. So it is universe means that it's like you are interested to, your study is to understand the psychological stress of the people with some disability. Okay, so your universe is, and suppose you are interested to do it in Haryana, so your universe is that those who are students and with some disabilities. Is it clear?
Then population and universe are synonyms, ma'am.
Yeah, in this respect population and universe are similar, synonymous.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
So,
Ma'am, we can, ma'am, can I speak?
yes,
Ma'am, we can say that
yes.
population and universe, and we can say that sampling is the representative of that population.
Right, right. I'm saying that the sample, because sample is a small subset of the population, right? You draw the sample based on certain judgment from the population. Now, why you draw the sample? Because you don't have so much affordability or you don't have so much time. So, in order to just minimize the expenditure as well as cut short the time, you do the sampling survey. Now, when you are drawing the sample from the population, your purpose is to make the sample representative of the population. That means whatever heterogeneity the population has, your sample should be drawn in such a way to incorporate all the heterogeneity. Otherwise, whatever conclusion which you will be deriving from the study of the sample won't be able to generalizable. That means external validation won't be possible, right? Because your sample is very narrow. It does not incorporate the heterogeneity of the population. Is it clear? The
Yes, yes.
example which I gave, that you are interested to understand the psychological stress of the PhD student of the university. Now, the PhD student doesn't belong to only social science. They belong to life science. They belong to physical science. They belong to computer science. They belong to management, commerce, etc., etc. Now, if you only incorporate the students from the social science, do you think that you will be able to do justice when you will be concluding about the psychological stress of or the mental stress of the PhD student of certain university? Will you be able to do the justice? No, because you have only confined yourself to the social science and you are drawing conclusion about all the PhD students of the university, which includes the students of life science, physical science, social science, the humanities, etc., etc. Okay, so your sample should be representative of the population. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Any other question?
Ma'am, can you suggest some good names for the research book?
So I don't know whether you are interested in doing qualitative research, quantity. There are many books, I can't suggest because I don't know much books about. People read Kothari, but in JNU I don't follow Kothari. Kothari is one book which is on research methodology, but I don't think that it is a good book. For me, I don't consider it as good book.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other participants?
But there are lot of books. So if you Google it, you will get a floodgates of books. So, and lot of books are soft copies are available. Okay, so there is no dearth of materials in the public domain. All you have to do is to spend time and see that which book is suitable, because I don't belong, my discipline and your discipline are not same, so I can't suggest that which one will be most appropriate for you. I may suggest some book which you may find very difficult to understand. Yeah, some other question? Yes, any other question?
Any participants have any question? Otherwise, we will end the session.
So I think although I could not cover much in this lecture, but at least whatever, I don't know, I am not satisfied because in terms of the content, I could not cover much because I tried to be much more explicit to some of the terms which I thought that some of you may not be able to understand, and I should be explicit on that. And that took a lot of my time.
No, I think all participants are satisfied, ma'am.
That's
Mind
great.
deciding the sample size. अब शेख गुप्ता है.
So what are the things we should take as sample size? So there are some methods for deriving some sample size, but the most important thing is that you should decide the sample size so that you incorporate as much as heterogeneity of the population as possible. That is the most important criteria. Okay, and then there is some quantitative method of calculating the sample size. Okay, and but that is not something which we always follow, because sometimes some plus, that means apart from that size, we need some more samples, because for the same reason that your sample does not incorporates all the traits of the population. So we go by the stratified random sampling, so you need more sample size. If you go by the clustered sampling, you need more sample size, etc. Yes, something ma'am, it was something I missed something. I don't know whether I missed something. Yeah. So I guess that you have any other questions. I would love to take it, but otherwise, I will just not use any formula.
Pani, can
Not
you unmute yourself and ask?
No, without using formula, I think that in that case, you can arbitrarily take some sample. Like sample size depend again on the qualitative research, whether your research is based on the qualitative analysis or quantitative. If you are dealing with a qualitative research, you don't need a very big sample size, because the idea is completely different. Here in the qualitative research, you do more in-depth kind of survey. एक एक आदमी को पकड़ के, it may continue for weeks, it may continue for months. So it's a more in-depth, it's a more of an open-ended, it's not a structured questionnaire. So you are basically examining the person from top to bottom. So you eat with them, you relax with them, you take tea with them, sleep with them, so that you come to understand their way of life, their perception, whatever they disclose, whether they are actually disclosing truly or not, many things. Okay, so the qualitative research, sample size is not important, but if you go for a quantitative research, definitely sample size is important, and many criteria are important. Apart from that, mathematical formula for calculating the sample size. Yeah. So, should I conclude then?
What is the ma'am? Yes, we have. If Kiwi
Maximum and
Toli,
minimum sample size
can you
for
unmute yourself?
qualitative study. I guess I have responded to you. For qualitative study, the you don't have to consider too much about the sample size or the representativeness, because the idea of the qualitative research and quantitative research are completely different. Quantitative research are based on the deductive reasoning. Qualitative research are largely based on inductive reasoning. So it is more of an inductive research where you don't have any concept hypothesis before you go to the field. You go to the field in a qualitative research in very open mind and allow yourself to examine things very minutely. And then once you are spending some time in the field, you maintain field diary, you maintain all the detailed informations which through the interactions which you have, and then come back and then conclude something, some theorize it or conclude something from the your field understanding. So it's a more of an inductive or explorative research. But quantitative research is more of a deductive in nature, where before going to the field you have a preconceived hypothesis and research questions, research objectives, and you go with a very focused manner within structured questionnaires, and you ask questions accordingly in order to elicit as much information which will cater to your research objectives and research questions. So these two approaches are different.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So just
Thank you so much.
I would like to invite uh, Madhuri Kaushik for giving the farmer vote of thanks. Over to you, Madhuri. Madhuri, can you listen me? Yes, Madhuri. Madhuri, you are mute. Please unmute yourself. Madhuri, please unmute yourself. Madhuri, you are not audible, I think.
I think it is fine.
I think that
I have
ma'am, it's
I have
it is
received some of their feedbacks.
on behalf of the all participants and on behalf of the Indian Research Scholars Association. I would like to thanks and uh, very soon we will invite again to Indrani Rai Madam because all participants have enjoyed this session. So thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm just leaving, huh?